Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Brian Martinez with today's Badger Pod Nerdcast, number 21, Advanced Villains and Victims, 4th edition. Today's
Fifth
show,
edition, fifth edition.
5th edition. Today's show is going to be about, in broader terms, the social justice influence on our tabletop gaming culture, which, tabletop goes way back. It's very old. It goes back to the 70s. So we're going to be looking at recent changes. Before we get into the topic, I want to introduce all of the panelists for today's discussion. So first, we'll start with Allison. She is the brainchild. She is the Cuntatrix. Allison, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Um, the brainchild of. Uh, okay, well, I guess to explain what Brian is saying, the Honey Badger Radio was originally my conception, and I have a fascination for systems. I really love dynamic systems, and gender, as far as I'm concerned, is a dynamic system. And so so my interest in gender is sort of a nerdity, I guess, would be the way to put it. And yeah, it's, um, I like as a result, I have an interest in men's issues and men's rights. And I get into a lot of conflicts with feminists who seem to want to think that gender isn't a dynamic, but is rather a black and white, good versus evil, simplistic story. And I elaborate on my ideas about gender in a dramatic long-form adult comic called Xenospora, which you can find in the low bar a link to if you're interested. And I'll go throw it back to Brian.
Okay, cool. I think the Xenospora world actually could be a pretty cool RPG, just as an aside, since we're talking about RPG stuff. Um, all right, so next up we have Anna Cherry. She's been on several shows already and is basically just one of us. So Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit how this topic relates to you.
All right. I am a cosplayer and an adult entertainer, as well as, I guess, a writer, blogger on a variety of gender and sexuality topics on my Medium page and my Tumblr blog, as well as occasionally contributing to SluttyGirlProblems.com. So I am also a gamer, mainly video game gamer, but I do love cons to the point where every single time I go to a con, I play board games, and I've played D&D 3.5. I've played briefly D&D 4.0. Excited about D&D 4.5. I mean 5.0. I've played Pathfinder. I've played board games. I recently got into Magic. I play Munchkin Dominion, Descent, all those things. So it's definitely a very big passion of mine. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm currently playing 5th edition, and I really like it. So, okay, so next up is Hannah Wallen. Hannah.
Hello. I am kind of an all-around gaming nerd, although I haven't had as much time lately as I'd like because of other things. But started gaming in 1987 with role-play games, and of course, regular tabletop board games I've played since I was a little kid. But a lot of what I played was first editions of things back in the 80s and the 90s. Call of Cthulhu before all of the copyright stuff. Played everything from Tales of the Floating Vagabond to Paranoia to first and second edition Dungeons and Dragons. Let's see what else. Star Frontiers, which was a knockoff of Star Wars to an extent. Gamma World. But right now I'm just doing D&D 3.5 and Pathfinder, and that's about it right now.
The Pathfinder, I call it D&D 3.75. That's accurate.
Well, yeah, the two have a lot in common. As I started learning Pathfinder, I realized there were several rule differences. I do like the difference in if your character is going to create items that it doesn't cost your experience points in Pathfinder. As it never made sense to me in D&D when they switched to costing experience points and everything like that. Creating stuff doesn't make you lose your learning. It doesn't make you less smart. It doesn't make you less wise.
If anything, it adds to it.
It would add to it, so it would make no sense for it to cost experience. But
Which
that's
is
just
what
my beef.
Bethesda did it right, where you level up by using the items and the skills that you use. That's how you level them up. I think that's genius.
Yeah.
All right, so next up, thank you, Hannah, for that, is Mike or Dr. Randomer Cam. Mr. Randomer Cam, would you give us a little bit about yourself? A little
Hello.
trio piece?
Yes. I'm kind of an art geek and kind of a logic geek at the same time. So as a result, I like to confuse myself a lot and make people sort of smile in the process. Because if you're smiling, then it doesn't matter what the rest of your face is doing. So on my YouTube channel, Dr. Random Cam, I like to make people smile and maybe not die if you're up for it.
Yeah, and I in particular like the last little honey badger cartoon with the wombats. Definitely hilarious and very relevant.
Thank you. Yeah, it
The
took
ending
ages
was
to
the
do
best.
that one. We came up with that like months ago in a chat. I finally got around to doing
I
it.
like the twist ending of directness.
The twist ending was absolutely as another. Well, you couldn't have foreseen it, but it wasn't the usual twist ending because it made everything a lot more clear instead of
It was
less
an
clear.
untwist ending.
It was an untwist ending.
Yes. All right, and last but certainly not least is Sour Grape. She's going to be the one that did the writing on this piece. But Sour, before you do that, and tell us a little bit about yourself, where we can find you, and also how this topic relates to you. And then you can just go ahead and give us the written bit.
All right, I'm Sour Grape. I am an amateur inquisitor of pretty much everything. I'm now working on geek culture, and how this relates to me. Well, I play Dungeons and Dragons. I used to play 3. I played 3.5. Didn't like the combat style. Moved on to 5th edition, having fun with it because I'm such a noob. And I mostly play board games at the moment, though. I love Descent 2nd edition. I love any H.P. Lovecraft thing. You just throw it at me. I'm fine with it. But yeah, I'm a tabletop player. I moved away from playing video games just to play tabletop. I know that's going to sound odd to most people, but yeah, that's what I did. And I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, well, I think that tabletop games has more of like a social. I mean, not that video games don't, but there's something around sitting with your friends and.
Yeah, I was about to say that it's like sitting in a circle. It's the next step from like the mealtime sharing communal event. It's basically one step removed from that, and it's a lot of fun.
I like
I don't
that.
know. I just like the community. I know that's going to sound odd, but I like the community aspect of it better than in video games where you can just play a game by yourself and hide in a little corner of your room.
But also, everyone's experience at the con, at least mine is, every time I go to a con, I finally let this big sigh of relief as soon as I step inside, and it's like, oh, my people, I am here, because there's this air of acceptance and almost like kindergarten, like in a good way, like everyone's just kind of playing with each other, like sandbox feel, and it's wonderful, and definitely something can be said for the con communities as opposed to the toxic video game communities that sometimes you encounter in FPS lobbies and things like that.
When I was a kid, playing tabletop games together was actually a way that my family bonded. One of the ways that my family bonded. We would, make popcorn and have snacks and everything besides popcorn and sit around and play Monopoly together. Or we would play some other game. We liked Clue and stuff. And
I was about to say, Clue is the
yeah.
family favorite.
Monopoly
that
is
was
not
a
the
big
best
one.
idea
Same
as a
here.
bonding exercise.
Oh no, that was actually that was a
No,
really
you need to be a
good
very strong unit to handle
Yeah.
a game of Monopoly.
Well,
you know.
my parents are school teachers, so it was actually a really, really. People get down on Monopoly, but the reality is you learn to have fun with a game, even though you know that you can get your butt kicked by everybody else in the game. You learn to enjoy the mechanics of the game. You learn to not hold things against each other. You learn not to be a sore loser. And it's a tough exercise, especially like we were elementary school age when we started playing these games, or early elementary school.
You earn healthy competition, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And that is something that actually has been under attack by social justice warriors, healthy competition, for years. Like the idea of scorekeeping in children's sports, the idea of win-lose games in the classroom, and things like that. That's majorly under attack. And it's ridiculous because life has that conflict in it all the time. You have situations where you're going to lose out. You go up for promotions against other people, and sometimes other people get the promotions, in your job. You present ideas to groups you're involved with, and sometimes they say, no, we don't want to do that. These are things that people need to learn to deal with. And, playing Monopoly as a kid, if you can't handle that when you're a little kid, learning to handle it is one of those things that helps you learn to handle those situations as you grow up.
It's a little microcosm of chaos. That there will be dice rolls in life. There will be things that are not fair for no reason. And you have to learn to deal with this in a small way before it happens in a big way, and it will.
More money will continue to have more money. It's a very, very good lesson in American capitalist society.
It is a good lesson.
Yeah. Well, before I bring Sour in to read the show notes for today's topic, I never finished a game of Monopoly in my life. It just took too damn long. And but anyway, so maybe that sort of says something about me. Okay, so Sour, go ahead and give us the reading.
All right. Tabletop games, whether pen and paper RPGs or board games, have been a source of entertainment for many, mostly nerdy people. From multi-user dungeons to Diablo and many massively multiplayer online games, tabletop role-playing games have been influential in the gaming scene. Tabletop games have also been used to treat different kinds of psychological problems like phobias and PTSD. However, as of late, there have been those that see tabletop gaming in a different way, as a means for people to display their love of distasteful and reckless experiences. Those critics have gone to different websites to show their outrage at what they feel tabletop has become. A group of mostly white, mostly misogynistic men sitting around gawking at half-naked women in chainmail bikinis and deciding who is going to ravage her. According to critics, this is an example of patriarchal design. After all, a white heterosexual biological determinist male, Ernest Gary Gygax, helped to create Dungeons & Dragons, which is the most popular role-playing game in existence. Bloggers and academics consistently mention problems they see, such as female characters' abilities not being equal to their male counterparts, orcs being used as a tool for perpetuating racism, or how not enough women are getting into the hobby. Among the critics is not only the starved for attention academic or blogger, we have people in high positions of gaming companies making odd claims. For example, in an interview, the project manager of Paizo Publishing, Jessica Price, has been an advocate of the idea that the foundation of role-playing games is sexist, and now games can move past these old barriers. Unlike those who say video games have a negative effect on society and provide no solutions, people who critique tabletop gaming usually have solutions. They have solutions like completely changing the artwork of a character, adding specific guidelines that clearly, albeit bluntly, state that they have the ability to create a pansexual otherkin with a fetish for cheese, along with adding content they want to X-card content that they consider unsuitable for the gaming experience. It is used to exclude player triggers from the game. What would the X-card guidelines actually look like in play? Well, here's an example. Imagine you and your group of adventuring heroes have gathered in front of an established trading town. One of the townsfolk tells you that there are some disturbances at night, people and property have gone missing, and they are unable to do anything because they're businessmen and they can't throw money at a problem, right? Your party decides to skip sleep that night and keep watch over the town. As you make your way into a dark alley, you hear strange hissing noises. Suddenly, snakes begin to swarm out of the well-hidden cracks and corners of the dead-end alley. X card! Suddenly, spiders crawl out. X card! Suddenly, hissing roaches. X card! Suddenly, dust bunnies swarm your face. Make an inhaler check. When someone has a problem, regardless of the context of a game, all they need to do is put up an X card, and the Dungeon Master must change whatever the player was triggered by. For the low cost of free, this solution may be coming to a Gen Con near you, followed right after a panel called Everything We Now Know is Sexist. Now what? And don't forget your complimentary Feminist Gaming Illuminati t-shirt. Whatever the solution, it all stems from the basic idea that they care and you don't. You don't want to play with X cards? Then you don't care about people as much as I do. You believe that there is a criteria for someone to be a geek? There shouldn't be gatekeepers. You're just being a bully. You have no objections with using rape or violence against women within the context of a role-playing game? You're uncreative. You don't like women and lack virtue or morals. Why would these groups do this, especially within a niche hobby with few players? They don't like you. They never liked you. They never wanted to play with you. And want an excuse to excuse you from the table because, of course, you don't care as much as they do. So what does an uncaring Dungeon Master say when an X card gets played by a player when they encounter their trigger in an alley? Just roll your fucking initiative and discuss.
All right, I'd like to jump in if I could for a moment. I have so many points on this. Well, first I'd like to address the very last one of why are they doing this? Well, I think maybe they're trying their hand at tabletop gaming and they realize that rules lawyering is pretty much the way to win. So X-Card is just a way to cheat, I think, whenever they're presented with something that they can't possibly overcome. In any traditional way or use any kind of skill or cunning or thought or merit at all to overcome, they are going to yell X card. And that's very similar to feminism overall now, isn't it? But going back to the foundations of RPGs being sexist, not sure what? Huh? What? Where's this? What? I'm so confused right now. And thinking back on the traditional D&D framework, yeah, orcs are orcs, but dwarves hate elves, and elves are like basically, fairies, and like everybody has issues. So I'm not sure why you would single out orcs and think of it as a race issue that way. And then on top of that, they are upset about not enough women being in these conventions, and then they also want to dictate and oppress how women dress and how they interact. If they want to wear chainmail bikinis, that's not okay. I'm just really confused about this whole mess of issues that they're piling on top of each other. It doesn't seem like they have a clear goal other than just to control gamers because they decided to.
Well, I think it's somewhere someone is having fun. They must stop. It's not allowed. Fun is triggering. But I wanted to point out some of the stuff that is actually does relate to what Anna was saying. Or maybe something that someone said before then. But I remember reading a social justice warrior cartoon it was a game making fun of edgy game designers. Of course, they pictured this particular edgy game designer as a dude bro in a fedora. And they used... or was it one of the things... Our Trilby, it was one of those uncouth hats.
And did he have neck beard too?
Yeah, probably. But and in it there was it said, well, as this game developer, you can use in order to be even more edgy, you can put violence against women in your game. And I was thinking about that, and the social justice warriors presented that as in this is a horrible misogynist trying to be edgy by using violence against women. And I was thinking, well, you realize that in presenting this in this way, you've just inadvertently said something about violence against men. Violence against men isn't edgy. That means it's socially acceptable. So what you're saying is that since violence against women is edgy and not socially acceptable, this guy is bad for putting it in his game. Well, if you're going to criticize it that way, then you got to recognize the flip side of it is that violence against men isn't edgy, and that means it's socially acceptable. But of course, they never really think this through. The fact that violence against women is edgy is because it's not socially acceptable. And anyway, I found that, and I think to answer your question about what they find sexist in Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop gaming, I believe I read one of their articles, at least as much as I could, and it was something about women having an agility stat, like women warriors having an agility stat and being able to max out an agility stat, whereas male warriors can max out the strength stat.
Oh, is that a
Which I
4.0
suppose was-
situation or a?
I don't know.
That actually reminds me of something really quick I was going to say. I recently went to a con and I was playing a game in a tournament, actually, a tabletop, I guess, card game, and dressed as Lulu. So it was kind of a revealing top outfit, and I got a very distinct sense that people treated me like I was made out of like porcelain eggshells. Like it was very, very strange experience. Not that I'm not used to it. So anytime they're actually speaking opposite of the actual experience of a female gamer or anyone who's at all dressed in a chainmail bikini, that is, they get extra attention, they get special attention, they get, in fact, I almost feel like, did I win on my own merit, or were people too intimidated to play against me because I'm a hot chick? Like, what was going on? People were like visibly nervous, their hands were shaking when they were interacting with me. So it's very interesting that they would somehow say that the con community, especially the tabletop RPG gamers, are in any way against women or don't want them, or it's very bizarre. Speaking from experience, anyway. But go ahead, sorry. I'll stop cutting in.
Oh, it's okay. It would seem that that you're absolutely right. The idea that the image of the chainmail bikini woman is somehow a sexist image that gamers want to perpetuate, and not at all like maybe a part of the sort of like a remnant of fantasy art in the general,
or even women's own desire to want to be powerful and sexual at the same time, and want to dress. I don't want to go to a con wearing a head to toe. Yeah, I was gonna stay away from that word, but yeah, basically.
Burqa +1.
Yes, intimidation -5 plus 10 against men. Like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to wear that. I want to wear something that shows off, a body that I worked hard to get, or whatever it is that's happening. And I find it very empowering to be seen as a sexual object who can kick ass at the same time. Why does that have to be reduced to one or the other? Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, that was, I wanted to say that. And as far as the orking thing goes, I wanted to say that when it comes to that, I do find it interesting that that's the approach they had, is that the idea that orcs they did these like weird mental gymnastics to sum up that orcs were somehow a racist image. And the only thing I could think of is that why did you guys come to this conclusion if you weren't already having somewhat racist thoughts yourselves? It's so strange, and again, you have to think about. I looked up the roots of orcs and where it comes from, and I don't know. It just, none of it adds up, and it just seems really out of place. And it's almost like these people are grasping. But Paizo is extra notorious for doing this. For those of you guys who play Pathfinder, there's actually a large element of this social justice influence in there, where they, again, they do this sort of tokenism thing where they add in like I think there's like a transgender dwarf character in one of their settings.
A dwarf would never be transgender.
Well, they made a transgender
Let me just say that.
dwarf, like in their fantasy.
How would you tell the difference? Aren't female
That's
dwarves
what I'm
supposed to
saying.
have beards too?
And they're very, like, their society, like, an elf would be the first to be a transgender character, if anyone at all in the D&D universe, I think.
Yeah, it's weird. Well, another thing is that someone told me that the belt, there used to be a cursed item, right, in an old D&D, that it was a belt that if you put it on, it changed your gender. Like, so if you were male, it made you female, and vice versa. And that was basically a gag. A lot of curses were kind of like, a laugh that you were supposed to, at the expense of the player character.
Yeah, because there really isn't anything that targets one gender over the other in the spells or anything, so it wouldn't do anything.
Right. Well, that's it. I'm saying it doesn't really penalize.
Right. Exactly.
But it was meant to be a gag. But I guess in Pathfinder they took out the idea that this belt was cursed, and instead it's just an item. So essentially trying to take the stigma out of the idea that your gender would change when you put the belt on, which I thought was funny, because if you were someone who was a man or a woman and you wanted to be a man or a woman, the belt that changed your gender was not something that you wanted because you were happy in the body that you had. So
I think that's extremely fallacious, because the whole point of RPGs and creating a character that you role play is that it already is a fantasy description of your true self. So if you are in your heart a different gender, you would already pick a character that's that gender.
Right.
And so the whole point of insults and jokes is that it challenges the identity that you choose. That's why that's why it's a gag, because you choose to be this gender and then it forces you to change it. It's not about, oh, I wanted to change my gender, but I just don't know how. And all these belts are being cursed, saying that, anyone who wants to change their gender is cursed. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? You're so reaching here. It's laughable.
Exactly, yeah. Well, Pathfinder is playing it extra safe, and or they're trying
extra
to
pandering.
This sort of thing, yeah. So I don't know, but that was all I wanted to say. Mike, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was coming back to this X card. I keep thinking about because you're right, Anna. It is a cheat card. Just it's a cheat card disguised as a victim card. Is what professional victims already get to use in all the spaces they've already invaded. Is the card they're trying to play all over the video
Guilt
game
as a
industry.
weapon.
Violence against women is the X card. This is why, like Alison noticed, it's simultaneously edgy and not edgy. It's whatever you want it to be. And there's one way around this problem. If the players at the tabletop have an X card to play whenever they're feeling icky, then the Dungeon Master should have their own X card to play in the event of X cards being a stupid fucking idea. You might call it the Y card. Your character encounters a goblin. X!
That's
Okay,
patriarchy.
why?
Dude. That's patriarchy. Total patriarchy. See?
You can probably see how this also works as an allegory for genetics.
Yes.
Yes, the allegory. It works.
The XX card. The YX.
Yeah. Well, but let me just first check to make sure I'm not talking over anyone. I don't want to do that. I can't tell. You guys talk too much. All right. Well, what I was going to say is that the X card, yeah, it is essentially a codified version of the victim card. I don't like this particular event. Change it for me. But what if the Dungeon Master has to pull off the Y card, to actually pull out some more ideas about the Y card, what if the Dungeon Master doesn't want to be made into someone's butt monk, that they have to do what the person's saying?
Would not having no X card at all, I would grant you that. But,
yeah, it would be but you pull the X card, the Dungeon Master has to change the story for you to accommodate you. What if that's bullying? I mean, because you're forcing someone else to do something they may or may not want to do. What if the Dungeon Master finds that process of being forced against his or her will,
here's the context.
Rewrite.
Well, X Cards was made by Stavropoulos, and people can go on my YouTube channel to see the entire X Card thing. The reason why he did it was he went to cons, and there would be awkward situations in which people, what's that event that's at Gen Con where you just sit and you just play games? You have to pay to get in, though.
Yeah, they call it I want to say it's like the round table or something.
Yeah, it's something like that, and you just go in and you play an RPG, just test it out, and you just sit there. There would be awkward moments within that, and there are new people around the table. They don't necessarily know what each other's triggers are, and they're not going to find out in that just meeting them. And so what he thought was, let's just make X cards. X cards are supposed to be, I mean, he says trigger. He doesn't like using the word, but it's trigger. They're supposed to be used in that context, but someone in California has taken that and put it in their board game store. Put it in their store and said, if you don't follow these guidelines, you're going to get kicked out. So if I'm a DM and someone puts X card, and notice X card, they don't have to say what the trigger is. Like my example, it could have been anything. It could have been dark. It could have been darkness, and I wouldn't know. So I'd have to change the story to suit them, but they don't have to tell me at all.
It's an exercise we do in improv a lot of the time when you're doing a scene and somebody just says or just clicks their fingers or says whatever the word is, and you have to change an aspect of the scene and like think of something else on your feet. But that's not how D&D works. One person's in charge, otherwise it's chaos.
And you have your specific story, your specific module, and you have your. I mean, everything is set up for you to play.
There is one important difference. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say this real quick between improv and this X card business. I thought, and I could be wrong, but I was under the impression that in improv, the idea is that you are saying, like, when there's a change, you're saying yes and, so you're not taking things out of the sketch. You're just adding.
Yeah, that's a guideline for performers rather than a rule. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that, but X cards are specifically saying I don't like this. It makes me feel icky, and therefore you got to take it out. But I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want anyone to know what my trigger.
It's not even no and, it's just no.
I don't say that's any different than how you would interact with any human being on the street, where you don't know what anyone's trigger is until you talk to them, and then why do you need this bossy outburst of X card? Stop right there, mister. Like, what the fuck?
It's not necessarily an outburst. In my example, it was.
Oh, I see.
It's silly, but all of you basically do is you get a note card. It might as well be an outburst to me.
Basically.
It annoys the shit out of me. But, you know, you just take the X card, you either tap it, or you just lift it up. You just tap it.
It's such a socially, very big gesture socially anyway. You're drawing attention to this situation. And
to the situation that you don't even
shaming,
know.
Basically. Yeah, and it's
bullying
like
and bureaucracy at the same time. It's all the worst of both worlds in this one little thing.
Not to mention that the hollaback people, for instance, the ones with the atrocious catcalling video, they support legislation that would increase police presence and police oppression in New York State right now. So it's like they are working hand in hand with oppressive forces. So how are they? The whole thing is such a big pile of hypocrisy. It's ridiculous.
Okay, well, here's my question. I assume that the dungeon master has a general idea of what is going to happen. Well, you know, like there's going to be content in their game that might be problematic. Why doesn't a person who has issues with certain things go to the dungeon master and say, "Hey, are you going to have this stuff in your game?" And or maybe they could have like a little list.
Because that would be a reasonable and sensible thing to do instead of attention whoring. Just saying.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, this X card is so bullying. Why do they have to do it in a way that causes, inconvenience to other people and forces other people to have to accommodate them in a situation where, they're
lights.
It just seems very intrusive and bullying, personally. Like,
but they're nice, and you're not.
That's how they justify it.
As long as it's buried under a little bit of bureaucracy, it doesn't look like bullying to them. They can just departmentalize it in their brain somehow.
Kind of like our government.
If people are enjoying something and then you throw this out and you say, no, you can't enjoy this because blah, 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 that is bullying. I don't see why that being proactive and saying, hey, do you have this content, or even just, I don't know, maybe the Dungeon Masters can list potentially triggering content and they can look at the list. Why wouldn't you do it that way? Why would you? Because it just seems so intrusive and like forcing, like it feels like you're making everybody your bitch.
I have an answer for that. There used to be a system called Lines and Veils, and this is what Stavropoulos referenced when he was making X cards. And X cards are just meant to be a simple, straightforward, easier way of Lines and Veils, which is basically what you said. You sit together, you make a list of all your triggers, and you just get away from it. I don't know where this necessarily comes from, because there are certain situations where, like, he listed triggers, like a bunch of example triggers, and some of them were chaos and death and darkness and all these crazy lists. Competition was one of them. And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, how am I going to play this game without competition? How do I X-card competition?
How far does this go? Like,
Gen Con, I think he goes there. He's a speaker of, I was going to say bullshittery, but he's a speaker of, like, gives advice at cons and stuff like that. So it just goes with certain people, I guess. And I don't, it's just ridiculous to me, this entire thing.
What I mean by how far does it go? I mean, because it seems like this system is simply a way to force people to do what you want. And there's a lot of, I'm sure for these individuals, there's a lot of pleasure in simply forcing people to do shit, and ordering them about. And what if your trigger is people forcing you to do shit and being ordered about?
Well, if you're a man, you don't have triggers.
Sorry?
If you're a man, you don't have any triggers. Remember? Like, you don't get to experience any emotions that are valid in their eyes if you're a man or anyone other than them.
I think if someone tries to X-card your X-card, then we have to observe the progressive stack.
And I think the world will collapse in on itself at that point, and the sheer stupidity.
What if dungeon masters are your trigger? You know, what happens then? So you can't play.
What if anyone but you winning
You
is your
can't play
trigger?
dungeon master.
Me losing is a trigger. Like, that's my personal trigger.
Okay, I just really have a question.
All right.
How much do these people actually hate their triggers? Because I have had, mental illness, I guess would be the anxiety disorders that are triggered. I don't want to use the word trigger; it's stupid. But certain situations, I have problems with, and in some cases, really severe problems. That to the point where I've had to have intensive therapy for years to be able to manage my life. And I do not fucking cultivate those triggers. I want to get rid of them. And I don't understand the mentality. If you have triggers like that, what you do is you get into therapy and you get rid of them. You don't inflict them on other people. I'm not going to go around and go into a game where or situations where I could be potentially so-called triggered and then insist everybody else change their behavior for me, because that's being an asshole. Nobody else is responsible for my problems but me. And like I said, if I have these triggers, I want to get rid of them. And I actually don't even understand why that a situation with being in a dungeon master with a group and being amongst friends wouldn't be the best place to maybe start to accommodate those kinds of triggers. First of all, even if it's a situation where you don't control when they come up, sometimes it's helpful to actually process the surprise. It seems more like this is cultivating a garden of triggers in order to be able to pull them out and shove them into people's faces and say, now you must do what I want. This triggers me. You must do it. And it's like, what kind of are these really triggers? Because if they're really triggers, you don't want them. You want to get rid of them. I'll believe they're triggers when these people indicate that they have been in therapy for years and they're trying desperately to resolve them and get them out of their lives. Because real triggers, you don't want. You are working hard to get rid of. So,
drawing away attention from real victims over and over, defrauding real victims with antics like this.
Talk about living your life in fear. This is it. This is what it looks like. This is making other people live their lives in your fear as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And how is that different than the people who are engaging in this kind of abusive behavior? If you're throwing your pain out and forcing other people to live it, how is that not abusive? Nobody outside of the person who did it is to blame for it. Why should they have to have it forced on them? I don't know.
Right, Hannah,
anyway, continue.
Hannah, do you want to say something?
Looks like Hannah's.
Did we lose Hannah?
Silent Hannah.
Not detected. She's muted though. It looks like.
I think you can unmute her, Brian.
It won't let me. I don't know why. I tried.
Okay, well, maybe we should move on to...
Crap.
I guess I sucked the air out of the room with that rant.
No. I wanted to go to a different... I mean, the X-Card thing is just, It's just a method of control that is softer than than what we would consider overt control. That's how I see it. And it doesn't sound like fun at all, at all. So I wanted to ask though about that panel that was like that was at Gen Con or at cons. Gen Con, for those of you who don't know, is basically one of the largest role-playing conventions. I go every year, and I'm noticing just when I started seeing X cards actually in play. I saw some people that were, it was a very cautious environment, and I was like, that doesn't look fun to me at all. But the thing I wanted to know was there was something about that we're saying that sexism is everywhere. Now what? And it was specifically in, at one of these speaking events, and the Sour was talking about. So but it looks like Hannah might be back. Hannah, are you there? Hannah? No. Crap. She's in the room but can't talk. Oh, it was at PAX. Okay, Sour, I'm sorry. But okay, so Hannah, well, no, you're fine. When you can, join us. So Sour, can you tell me a little bit about what their goal, what their point was? I remember there was another thing too. There's a book that was kickstarted, and they made I want to say it's 4 times what they needed to get it printed, and it was about women in game design for tabletop games, and they were all writing anecdotes about their struggles and how hard it is to make it in the game design industry because of the men's. So apparently, when we're not chaining you guys to stoves and refrigerators, we're chaining you guys to gaming tables.
Oh well, no, you guys are barricading us, standing in Red Rover lines, being no, you can't come here. Because men don't want to be surrounded by attractive women that they can geek out with on the same topic.
Yeah, I have X cards for women that try to get involved in my hobbies. No, I don't.
It's your trigger.
Sour,
people who have Twitter PTSD syndrome, I don't think they should be going to cons in the first place. They should be in intensive fucking therapy. As I tweeted a while ago, if you're having trigger warnings reading this, you shouldn't be reading this. You should be in therapy right now. Intensive, hardcore therapy.
Yeah.
As Alice pointed out. More eloquently than I just.
Sour, can you talk to me a little bit about the about what they were talking about at the PAX thing?
Well, sure. Someone, and I linked this all to what I wrote, the introduction. Someone went there and they sat down and they took notes because you have to take notes when you go to a convention. They said that during the panel, they talked about checking your assumptions and your perceptions, read, watch, and play things made by people who aren't like us, learn to recognize tropes, ask yourselves why we like the things we like, improve our work, address issues. And the last part, address issues, is basically all they want to do. I have yet to hear any proper solution to any of the problems that they have raised, because all the problems that they have raised are non-existent. For the most
I think
part,
with as many Japanese games and cartoons as we watch, I think we are consuming things made by people not like us a lot as it is. So that one's out the window. Done. Checked. Move on to the next one.
I mean,
yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
All right.
And I'm sorry to take this back to X cards, but why would they, in this whole situation of censorship of a concept, why would they do this?
Why have X cards?
No, why have X cards is supposed to even be a play on words where, X card things. Why would you want to do something like this? Why would you want this kind of environment at your convention?
Because you've been doing this for a long time and no one said no to you. So you think this is fine.
Also, they're not gamers. They're not really gamers, as we know with Sarkeesian. They're not going to these conventions. They just want to be able to dictate what we do at those conventions. They don't care. They're not living the consequences of them. They don't give a fuck if the environment's oppressive because it's not oppressive to them. They're in charge. They feel great. Everyone else feels terrible. But they like the modicum of empathy to realize what they're doing and how. And then they're like, oh, why don't you like feminism and bossiness? Because you're fucking oppressing us. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, role-playing is at its core a cooperative experience, even if the game master is creating adversity for the players. But it's like a thing that everyone's in on, and they all know they're doing it, right? And the game master is running the game to make things challenging, and the players are working together to overcome things. The idea that you can control everyone's level of enjoyment by forcing people to take things out or to change who they are to suit you or to otherwise control the situation is subtractive. It doesn't add anything. It makes it worse. So that says to me, at its core, the people who do that are not interested in cooperative play. They're not interested in being social with everyone else and they want their personal issues and their whatever it is, they want that to be the dominant factor. That's why it feels so much like attention. I don't want to say attention whoring, but yeah, attention whoring is what it sounds like. I mean, when people want to be the most important person at the table, and so to do that, they'll ruin everyone else's fun if at all possible, and they'll do that with these kinds of systems. Whatever we want to call it, it's the same idea. You're having fun. I don't like that. I'm gonna mess with it. Oh, I don't know why. Or they come into this space that when I'm an old school gamer. I've been playing D&D since the '80s when I was like 11 years old or so. And when I was doing it, it was something that you couldn't even talk about in public discourse. Like I couldn't tell someone that I did that and not be picked on or made fun of for it. And now, even now, it still isn't as mainstream as some of our other geekier hobbies like video games and anime and stuff, but it's becoming more acceptable, because maybe like geeks have gotten married and have kids and they've raised them that way, and so their kids get geeky, and also because the whole concept of like a con has broadened. So when I used to go to cons in the early years, it was almost exclusively like D&D and Call of Cthulhu and like these very sort of niche markets, and like Vampire came out, and then it sort of became a little bit more popular, and so on. It grew from there. But now, if I go to Gen Con, it's like, there's role-playing games there, but there's also Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and anime and comic books and video games, and so it's grown, and it's sort of like ancillary to the mainstream. But as a result of that, there are people who might have had an interest in Doctor Who or something that have like kind of spilled over into role-playing, but there's something about the role-playing game community that they don't like, and they want to change it. And I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point, but that's basically what I've observed, and that's how it makes me feel like they're not interested in. Again, I'm not like some guy who never wants to change. I want more people to play these things.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, our hobby is specifically made for more people to play. Why would you then come up with a system that he even says it listed if somebody doesn't want to play X cards, what do? You don't play with them. Do you understand how that offends me more than anything I've ever heard from anyone who says they're a tabletop player? I'm not going to play with them. I'm going to exclude that person entirely from my life because I don't like the way they're. That's just. And this is the thing. I sort of disagree with you, Anna. I actually think they are gamers, but they want games to. They like gaming. If we're going to go in the base level of what a gamer is, they like gaming. They want to like it more, but they can't because they want it in a specific way. They want it their way. They love games. They love the idea of games. They love whether
Maybe
it's money or whatever.
Of winning.
They like, they like the idea of winning, and that's fine. But I just don't understand how they can do it.
Well, we need basically what they're assuming and what they're saying without saying it is that people at cons and gamers are the COD players and the meathead footballers who are terrible people who will just trample all over your sensitive parts and will just be terrible people to you emotionally. And it's like, no. If you've been to a single con, for the most part, people are extremely gentle and sensitive just as they're just default. They just by default are very soft and gentle people, which is one of the reasons they're not super popular in the normal world. And they have to go to the cons and they feel good there where people are gentler. So it's already at cons you have very sensitive environments as it is. And to have the X card on top of that, it's very much a ploy.
You know what I think this actually is? I think this actually is they want to make an excuse for them to not play with me. They know I'm not going to like X-Card.
And you know who's going to call them on their bullshit? They don't want to.
Yep,
they don't want to play with them.
That's exactly it. I think that's exactly it, because the way he wrote that, it was just so offensive to me. Oh, that's what I think.
Because it's meant to exclude you specifically and people like us.
Well, they want to be simultaneously. They may have an interest in games, but they want to simultaneously, because the nature of a game is that it's this world that your actions, take place within. So you act upon a game, but they simultaneously want to take part in something that's almost completely, like games are completely passive. You act on them, and they just provide consequences to your actions. They seem to want to have it both ways. They want to be able to be a gamer and act on the game, and yet still have the game act on them, and not have that be utterly ridiculous. So, does that make any sense to anyone? Because I feel like I'm talking into like a silence of.
That's only because it's really quiet.
Yeah.
No, it absolutely.
You've gone deep squid there, Alison.
I deep squidded it.
Yeah, like 12% of the audience are going to get what you're talking about. That's my rough estimation.
Okay, all right. Let me try again in simpler terms.
I got it.
A game, you take action in a game, and a game shows you the consequences of those actions. These people want themselves to be a consequence. They want to sit around and be consequences for the actions of others, and it's like this fight between these two identities. That they want to provide the consequences for other people's actions, so they get to judge them. But at the same time, as they want to sort of take action themselves. But in order to take action themselves, they have to see themselves in terms of being an action taker. So when there is when there is a situation, you take action to resolve that situation in the way that you want it to be resolved. That's what an action taker does. You don't just sit there and say, "Oh, that triggered me." I'm saying that those two identities are in conflict, or those two impulses are in conflict with them.
Well, you can to some degree be affected by a game if that game is very immersive. Like maybe if it's some kind of 3D IMAX video game, maybe that could have an effect. But if it's a tabletop game, if it's D&D, it's about as removed from reality as you can get, because you're just rolling a dice and reading things out.
The whole point is making up your own reality. There is no reality.
That's not how they see things, though. That's not how they see things, though, Mike. It's more of you're putting your personality into a character, and therefore you are that character.
But if that kind of game can act on you, then
exactly.
Then you're really, really reaching. You're revealing just how fucking reaching you are, because it's just words and dice.
Thing. If you have that gamer identity or its subsidiaries or parallel identities in which you see yourself mostly as taking action in response to circumstances, when the game supposedly acts on you, you just take action and turn it off.
Yeah.
And so it's that conflict between.
We're not talking Oculus Rift buried into your brain like the Matrix here. We're talking words and dice.
and something with an off switch.
Pen, paper, and dice. That's literally all you get. Sometimes little figurines, but pen, paper, and dice. It's pretty as minimalist as it gets.
Yeah, this is not something that can significantly act upon you without your consent.
Yeah.
It's just not. And the framing, what I'm trying to say is they're trying to frame it that a piece of a pen of paper and some dice can have more effect on them than they have on it.
But yeah, if I understand your point correctly, Alison,
it's because it's dice. It's because it's chaos. Just that little bit of chaos in these words is what fucking triggers them.
But if I understood correctly, what you were trying to say is that they sort of put to the lie their victimhood by acting upon others and claiming this X card. Is that what you're saying, basically?
No, I'm saying that they have two impulses in conflict. If they genuinely like the nature of games are about taking action, seeing what those consequences are to those actions. And games can be affecting, but usually that's a result of how you've interacted with them and how your actions have played out within the game. So it's really you and the choices that you've made that are affecting you at the end of the day. So there's that mentality that in terms of you experience a circumstance, you take action to affect the outcome you want. That's a way of looking at yourself solely in terms of the actions you take, right? They don't want to see that. they want to see themselves in terms of how people act on them, or objects or games or whatever media, how it acts on them, and how they're helpless and vulnerable, and they're just these feathers floating in the wind of everything else. They want to emphasize the fact that when something happens, they can't deal with it. They can't take action. They are prone upon the floor or whatever else, right? And it's those two concepts that are in complete opposition. Does that make sense?
Very
Yeah.
much so.
Essentially,
Yeah, finally.
this is all about taking action and like making choices and being an active participant. But and then the DM or the game master describes and otherwise sort of presents the outcomes of those decisions. But people who utilize the X card system are trying to get they're in many ways they're trying to control the outcome before they have to deal with any of the struggle that comes like that might like they're trying to circumvent the entire whatever it is that they feel triggered by without having to deal with it themselves.
Can I propose something? These X cards turn them into Mary Sues in the game world, because they can defy the game logic and rewrite it completely to totally suit their own particular moral landscape.
And they can sort of spin to one side and have their own little game in the corner with some stuffed toys
Yeah.
and some pretend teacups.
But no, but that doesn't mean they have to. But in that scenario, Mike, where they're having a game in the corner with their stuffed animals and teacups, they're not forcing other people to be with them. They're not holding them hostage and shoving their ideas down their throat. You see, there isn't enough rapiness in just telling them. In that, if there's social justice warriors, there has to be a certain element of social rape before some activity becomes interesting to them.
You haven't
That
been
they can
socialising
do
with the
against
same
somebody
stuffed animals as me.
I think I just took this not to the silly place, but the very dark, very, very dark place.
I'm trying to keep
Good
it
thing
silly.
the fox is here. Sour, did you want to...
Oh yeah, I just wanted to make one final weird point, and after doing all this research, looking at all the complaining, whether it's orcism or women not being represented in Dungeons and Dragons, I sort of have this question for them, and it's, why would you pick, and I know why they did it, but why would you pick, out of everything, Dungeons and Dragons to complain about, when there are other games out there that are really, really horrible? One of them is Fatal Fantasy Adventure to Adult Lechery, which I feel sad to say, the guys who created it went to my college. And it's literally considered one of the most misogynistic RPGs ever made. It's unplayable, really, when you think about it, but it's really a horrible, horrible RPG. And they don't complain about that. They'll move on. They'll just talk about things that people have loved since the 80s, but they will never talk about something as specific as that because they don't understand it. They didn't do any research, and they're just there to complain.
Yeah. I
Yep.
agree.
Well,
No, I was just gonna say, there's actually, this is a much bigger topic because there's other things that we could talk about, but I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap it up at this hour and then revisit this topic again because there's like stuff with LARPs that I want to talk about. I don't play LARPs, that's not my cup of tea, but I think that that's a topic we can get into. And there's other elements too, like other sort of like card games and things like that. But and we could talk about Paizo somewhat because we didn't really go into that too much. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
Someone was mentioning something in the chat. Eclipse.
I know exactly what that is. Eclipse Phase. On the forums, they banned MRAs. They don't even have to ask you if you're MRA. We can talk about that later too.
Yeah.
Yes. Tons of research on this crap.
Okay,
we can talk about censorship. We can talk about a lot. Yeah. There's
a lot
of stuff.
There's a lot more stuff we could talk about, but we, in honor of the person that in honor of our fallen comrade, who fell during this very show, victim of frickin' computer problems. I think we've decided to no. So we usually end at the hour, so we're just not going over.
The
So-
computer X-carded her.
Yes. Yes.
Didn't like
I'm
it.
triggered.
Triggered by her irrationality and calling to bullshit of
Yes.
feminists.
Oh, and I'm sure that she had some good stories too about role
Oh, yeah, I
I
know.
really wanted to talk about this. So we'll definitely have to come back with Hannah when we get her computer situation figured out. But I don't know. I guess we'll just close out for now with the usual shilling of the Patreon. So Alex,
Yeah, I can chill. I can chill away here.
good boy.
If you enjoy our discourse, if you want to see more of it happen and bring more of this particular, I guess, way of looking at the world, way of looking at gender as a dynamic rather than possibly the most black and white psychological gender apartheid in human history, and look at it in terms of women's ability to have agency and having agency, period, and men's vulnerabilities, and putting it all into the pot and seeing it as more of a gender goulash, as it were, if that makes any sense. Probably not. I hear silence, so not even laughter. So won't go any further with that one. Anyway, if you like this discourse,
Is that like ground beef?
On the inside.
it's what?
What have you, by
I
the
was trying
way,
to remember what
Harry?
goulash was.
Building in my
Okay,
belly.
not
I'm going to be on the floor in like a
Why
minute.
everybody at once? First of all, Mike, what did you say?
I don't know. What have you got in the way of curry?
Curry?
Yeah, goulash
Well,
isn't that like ground beef type stuff?
Okay, so I'm guessing the goulash is not a very hard sell.
You've got nothing but silly answers, I'm afraid. Do carry on with the serious stuff.
All right, yes. Yeah, okay, so it doesn't happen without donations from viewers such as yourself. So if you like the show, like the message, like the fact that we don't blame men, nor do we turn women into jelly mold creatures that all they do is quiver and cry, please do consider donating to us. Our Patreon is www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And also, the current patrons will probably roast me on a steak if I don't mention this. We have a stream group on Stream, I believe it is, and I'm probably going to get this name completely wrong, but it's Honey Badger Radio Gamers with Bite.
Is that Steam? On Steam? Or the...
Oh, Steam!
no,
Steam! Did I say
Wasn't
stream
sure.
again?
I think
Did I
so.
say stream again?
I think so,
Oh,
yeah.
God. I'm
Steve,
never going to live that down. They're probably already got their keyboards up
Snickering.
and worrying about that. Yeah, click, 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 click. It's Steam, not Stream, Allison. Yeah, go to the Steam place with the Steam. and
That
look
does
up.
do streaming, which is very confusing.
Yes, it is. It's totally, especially for someone like me. I don't have that many brain cells to keep track of all the words I'm supposed to use. Steam, go to Steam, Honey Badger Radio Gamers with Bite. And yeah, they'll love you there if you go and join, and you can play games with the others and such. They're a great group of people, by the way. Very, very great group of people. And if you want to become a patron and join that great group of people, again, it's patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Thank you. I feel a little bit like a wrung out rag now. So
You got
Let's
the
end it.
Patreon right. That's all good.
yeah.
Steam. Sounds bad.
No, Steam.
Steam. Yes. Get on there. Play. Somebody in the chat already put the correct thing, but you had it right. Honey Badgers with Bite. All right. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you for joining us on the Padger Pod Nerdcast, and we'll see you next Monday around this time.
Or maybe even